Greetings in Yeshua. Today, I want to tell you about my new book, not yet published, but on the very verge, and that is The Wars of the Jews by Joseph ben Matthias, better known as Josephus today, with the assumption that this is the lost Aramaic version, mined from the Slavonic, rendered into English by Leeming and Leeming, and edited by me, Jackson Snyder. The Wars of the Jews. This is the Slavonic version. Try to find one. You'll have a tough time, as I had a very tough time to find something to start my translation and edition with. Greetings in Yahweh and our Messiah Yeshua. I'm here to tell you about my new publication, that is, The Wars of the Jews, the Slavonic version, which I believe is a translation of the lost Aramaic version that Josephus sent out to the Jews in the dispersion after the Jewish War, Jewish rebellion of 66 AD to 73 AD. The Wars of the Jews by Joseph ben Matthias, or Mattia, with the assumption that this is the lost Aramaic version, mined from the Slavonic language, rendered into English by Leeming and Leeming, and edited by yours truly, Jackson Snyder, which took me 6 years. I finished it up actually at the beginning of 2025. It's a long, long translation, 300 and some pages. And I consider this a reader's version in 7 books. Josephus had 7 books of the Slavonic, Aramaic Josephus, and they're all in my version. But what I'm particularly interested in today is excerpts, some quotations referring to Jesus and his primitive movement. And I just wanted to read through a few of them because they have to do with our master. Believe it or not, his people, the Dunker, Herod, the massacre of the children of Bethlehem. I don't know how many of these I'll read for you, but this isn't the whole of the Aramaic Slavonic Josephus. These are just excerpts, and it amounts to 11 pages. But first, I want to tell you why I reproduced this manuscript. And here's my story. I've been so interested in Josephus' Jewish War for years, particularly in this Slavonic version. Almost 20 years before I finished this edition from Leeming and Leeming, I picked up my copy of Wars of the Jews, that is the Greek-English version, the common version, and I was determined to read it through. As I was engaged in this, I noticed that many events resembled those of the Revelation or the Olivet Discourse. The farther I went into the wars, the more convinced I became that the Revelation was chronicling the Jewish civil war and revolt against Rome, 66 AD through 73 AD, 7 years. I hadn't heard of the preterist viewpoint of prophecy at that time, in which the recorded passages were already fulfilled in the past, I believe. So this was a major discovery for me to see these correspondences. I began to note them in the margins of the book, and by the time I was finished with it, I became convinced that Jesus Christ was in fact doing that very thing, recording that horrible war in the prophetic language of the bygone prophets. I was already quite familiar with Revelation, having written a book years earlier on my theories about its fulfillment in the 20th century. Oh, that was back around 1990. Throughout the years of my life, there was something of a frenzy among popular Bible scholars to relegate Revelation to the present or the future. Look at that, a typo. How about that? Serving two purposes. And it seemed to me that we should instead be looking to Europe during the Second World War, which was also 7 years, according to my reckoning. For to begin with, the head of the sea beast in chapter 13, Nero, has several characteristics in common with another beast, Adolf Hitler. However, in those days, experts were certain that the 10 horns in Revelation were the members of the European Common Market, later the European Union, that would expand to 13 nations, then decrease to 10 and remain there. Today, there are 27 horns in the Union. In addition, though, the EU throne 666, number 666, belonged to Roman Prodi, an Italian politician who served from 1999 to 2004 as president of the European Commission. Of course, that view and my former futurist view of Revelation is absolutely passé today. I now understand that Revelation is Jesus, Yeshua's cryptic, secular, religious history through John of Israel's fate in the last third of the first century AD, as is the very important companion, the Olivet Discourse of Matthew 24. Revelation and the Olivet go together like a horse and carriage. Later, I learned that there was an Aramaic version of the war written expressly for the dispersed Jews of that time, and that this older Aramaic version just disappeared and has not yet been discovered in its original language. It hasn't been discovered yet, though there are versions of it in the language of Old Church Slavonic. Its contents, the Aramaic version, is very different than the popular Greek redaction read in English today. Could the Slavonic version be a translation of the Aramaic war by the Catholic evangelists Kirill and Methodius or their students in the 9th century or later? That would be amazing, and that probably is. Learn about Kirill and Methodius, and some of your problems with prophecy will blow away like bubbles on the wind. I consulted with Robert Eisenman, a major historian of religion, as to that possibility, and he agreed that it could be, and probably was, a translation into Slavonic of the Aramaic version. So I tried to track down a copy of the Slavonic Wars translated into English on the internet, bookstores, every place I could. I read that it had finally been translated in the 1930s, almost 100 years ago, but that book was no longer available. But a friend from a social media group found a new digital copy of the Leeming and Leeming translation comparison of the Slavonic War with the Greek, and he sent me a copy in 2019. What a fine friend. Because to buy the new Leeming and Leeming translation, the publisher wanted $700. And as an unpopular retired church minister, I couldn't afford that. I learned from the U.S. Copyright Office that if a copyrighted book was considered too expensive for common readers, a facsimile could be created and distributed. and that was legal. I eagerly started translating and editing their rather crude work into American English, simplifying it and correcting what I knew were mistranslations and archaic words little known today. I was looking for references to nascent Jewish Christianity, to Jesus, John the Dunker, or the Jesus people, and any event not considered in the Greek Roman English version, anything that would bring clarity to so-called Jewish Christianity, as it's called today, or the Revelation, or the war. I found many new people and events in the book, and I marked what many scholars called Christian interpolations in my editions. I, for one, do not consider these entries to be Christian interpolations. There's no convincing evidence that Christian scribes of the distant past have added anything to Josephus. Yet scholars, legitimate scholars, won't even look at this text. It is a mystery, and probably because it refers to Yeshua and his party in many places, and they just didn't want that to get out. They say there are no contemporary or contemporaneous notices about Yeshua. However, they're not looking at this text from the first century. Hmm. There are some autodidactic researchers, people like me, who would want to use the Slavonic version, but few people I know would be willing to put out nearly $1,000 for it or take the time to try to find a legal copy. Now, 6 years later, since I found it, The Wars of the Jews, Slavonic, translated to English in my edition, will soon be available for sale for a pittance, printed version, and in some internet venues, my venues, it'll be free in PDF and available from several online locations. And this is as of 2025, 300 pages. Now, in this text of quotations, I'm just having 11 pages of quotations about the movement. As I mentioned, in my version, there are 300 pages of all kinds of stuff that is not in the normal version of Josephus' Jewish Wars. And I've got a list in this sheet, which I'm offering to give you for free, with some of the places you can get this and some of the other books that I have read and published. Right there. So I'm inviting you to inquire for these excerpts while I finish publishing the book. And I'll be glad to send them to you. Just let me know you want it. Go to yahad.me, that's YAHAD.me, and ask for Slavonic Josephus. You don't have to spell it right. I'll know what it is. And I'll send you these excerpts, of which I'm going to read just a few. The header is Priestly Lamentations and Hopes. Herod, Messiah. Immediately the priests started to grieve and complain to one another, saying among themselves in secret what they would not dare to say in public because of Herod's friends. Again, these are the words of Josephus, which I have edited so we can understand what he's talking about. For they were in secret what they would not dare to say in public because of Herod's friends. I think I did that. For they were saying, the Torah forbids us to have a foreign king, and we're expecting the anointed one, the meek one of David's line. Yet we know that Herod is an Arab, uncircumcised, and the anointed one will be called meek. But this Herod has filled our whole land with blood. Under the anointed one, the lame were to talk, the blind to see, the poor to prosper. But under this fellow, the whole have become lame. Those who could see have gone blind. The rich are beggars. What is this? Did the prophets lie somehow? They wrote that we'll never lack a prince of Yehuda until there comes the one to whom it is given back. And in him the nations will hope. But this fellow, is he the hope of nations? We detest his misdeeds. Are the nations going to hope in him? Oh my! Elohim has abandoned us and we are forgotten by him, and he wishes to commit us to desolation and ruin greater than as in the time of Nebuchadnezzar or Antiochus. For then the prophets were teachers of the people and promised us captivity and return. But now there is no one to ask and no one to console us. Second item I have is entitled, The Persians and Their Stars Converse with Herod. This comes right after a little speech by Herod. Having so spoken, Herod sent the Persians off to the innkeepers, speaking of what the Bible calls magois or magi. He calls them Persians here, and indeed that's where they came from, escorting them with guards who were to keep watch on them, and also appointing other guards who knew the Persian tongue so as to hear what they said. This tells us a lot of things about it. So when they were in camera with a Persian, they began to grieve, saying, Our fathers and our children have been excellent astrologers and watching the stars never lied. And we too, taught by them, have never distorted the message of the stars. What can this be? Deceit or error? The star image appeared to us signifying the birth of a sovereign by whom the whole world will be held. And gazing on that star, we have been making our way for a year and a half to the city, and we've not found the son of a sovereign one. The star is now hidden from us. We have indeed been deceived, but we shall send the gifts we had prepared for the infant to the king and ask him to let us return to our fatherland. While they were thus speaking, the guards came to the king and told him everything. And Herod sent for the Persians, and while they were on their way, that remarkable star appeared to them again. They were filled with joy, and they went by night to Herod with boldness, and he said to them, Away from everybody. You got it. Why do you sadden my heart and distress my soul by not speaking the truth? Why have you come here? They told him, King, we speak no double talk. We are sons of Persia. Astronomy, which is our science and our craft, our ancestors took over from the Chaldeans. As we gazed on the stars, we've never been wrong. This indescribable star appeared to us. It was set apart from all the other stars, for it was not one of the 7 planets, not one of the spearmen, not one of the swordsmen, not one of the archers, not one of the comets, but it was exceedingly brilliant like the sun. It was joyful. We've even reached you by gazing on it. And while we were here, the star disappeared right up to the present. But now, as we were coming to you, it appeared again. And Herod said, Can you show it to me? And they said, "We reckon the whole world sees it." And they stepped out onto an open porch and they showed him the star. When Herod saw it, he marveled greatly, and he worshipped Elohim, for he was a devout man. He gave them an escort composed of his brother and some nobles to go and see the one born. But as they were on their way, the star disappeared once more, and they returned again. The Persians begged him to let them go on their own, promising that having sought out the child, they would come back and tell him. They swore him an oath, believing that the star would tell them to return by that road, and they followed the star. Following section is Herod murders the babes of Bethlehem. Now, this is an account outside the Bible that scholars and researchers say simply doesn't exist. Herod waited a year for the Persians, but they didn't even come to see him, so he was furious and summoned his advisors, the priests, and asked them if any of them understood that star. They replied, "It is written, a star shall shine forth from Yaakov, and a man shall arise from Yehuda." And Daniel writes that a priest is to come, but we do not know who this is. We reckon that he will be born without a father. Herod said, "How could we discover him?" Levi said, "Send a message to the entire land of Yehuda. Learn how many male infants have been born since the Persians saw the star right up to the present day. Kill them all, and the one in question will also be killed. Then your kingdom will be secure for you and your sons, and even for your great-grandsons." And immediately he sent forth heralds through the whole land, and all the babies of the male gender born from now and to the third year back are to be honored and to receive gold. He lied. When inquiring whether any males had been born without a father, they were to pretend that Herod would adopt him as a son and make him a king. And since they didn't discover a single such babe, he gave orders to kill all 6,003,000 infants. That's a lot of infants. When all were weeping and wailing at the shedding of blood, the priests came and begged him to release the innocents, but he threatened them all the more to keep silent. So they fell prostrate and lay to the 6th hour at his feet. And the king's rage prevailed. But later they rose and told him, "Listen to your servants, so that the Most High may favor you. It is written that the Anointed One is born in Bethlehem. Even if you have no mercy on your servants, kill those infants of Bethlehem and let the others go." And Herod gave the order, and they killed all the babes of Bethlehem. Following Herod's prowess and condemnation, by the way, the pages here are for the larger Aramaic, Slavonic wars of the Jews, which I am about to publish. So you can find it in there. Herod's body was as sturdy as his soul. He was a consummate horseman and hunter. And one day, he himself speared 40 beasts, wild boars, stags, and others. As a combatant, he was irresistible. Men marveled, seeing him at exercise, for he was a matchless spearman and an accurate archer, and apart from his strength and spirit and agility of body, his good fortune lasted. After every battle, he remained unbeaten, except when his commanders did not obey him and took fright. And for another reason that we have already described, the search for the Christ and the slaughter of the infants. They cursed him, and so that he also might himself be childless. Oh, I need to check up something here. Okay, I think everything's going right here. I hate to read all the way through these things and then have it not come out on Zoom, which does happen occasionally. The next header is The Wild Man, Prophecy of Unspeakable Calamity. At that time, a certain man was going about Yehuda in strange garments. He put the hair of cattle on those parts of his body that were not covered with his own hair. I don't like that word, which. In America, we say that. He was wild looking. He came to the Jews and called them to freedom, saying, Elohim has sent me to show you the lawful way by which you will be rid of many of your rulers. There will be no mortal ruling, only the Most High who has sent me. Now, when the people heard this, they were glad. And those of Judea, those of Yehuda, and the environments of Jerusalem were following him. He did nothing else for them but to dunk them in Yardan's stream and dismiss them, bidding them refrain from their lawless acts. Then a king would be given them to save them. He would be humbling all the unsubmissive, as he himself would be humbled by no one. Some mocked his messages, others believed him. And when he was brought before Archelaus, Herod's son, when the experts of the Torah were assembled, they asked him who he was and where he had been up until then. In answer, he said, I am but a man. I go wherever the divine spirit leads me. I feed on the roots of reeds and the shoots of trees. When those people threatened him with torture if he didn't cease those words and acts, he said, It is you who should cease from your foul acts and adhere to the sovereign Elohim. Then arising in fury, Shimon, an Essene by origin, a scribe, said, We read the divine scriptures every day, and you who have now come in like a beast from the woods dare teach and lead people astray with your disrespectful words. And Shimon rushed forward to tear his body apart. But he, reproaching them, said, I am not revealing the mystery that is here among you to you. So an unspeakable calamity will come down upon you because you and all the people have not wished to hear. And so he spoke and left for the other side of the Yarden. And since no one dared to prevent him, he continued doing just as he had done previously. That sounds like the wild man, John the Baptist, or as I call him, John the Dunker. Next item is Philip's dream and interpretation. The wild man returns. This is a rather long one. When his domain had been taken away from Archelaus, Caesar Augustus handed it over to his own governors, but Philippus and Antipas, surnamed Herod, held their tetrarchies and founded many cities for Caesar, including Julius and Tiberias, in honor of Tiberius. Philippus, while being in his own domain, saw in a dream an eagle tear out both his eyes. And he called together all his wise men, and they, when others were resolving the dream. Otherwise, the man we have already described is walking about in animal hair and cleansing people in the streams of Yarden, canoed to Philip suddenly, without being summoned, and said, "Hear the word of the sovereign. The dream you have seen, the eagle, is your aggressive greed, for that bird is violent and avaricious, as is your sin. It will pluck out your eyes, which represent your domain and your wife." Once he had spoken this interpretation, Philip passed away by evening, and his domain was given to Agrippa. Herod Agrippa? His wife, Herodias, was taken by Herod Antipas, his brother. Because of her, all those who were learned in the Torah detested him, but didn't dare accuse him to his face. Only that man they called Wild Man, Therion, whom we call Yochanan, the sovereign's dunker, came to him in fury and said, "Since you, lawless one, have taken your brother's wife, just as your brother died a merciless death, so you also will be cut down by the sky's reaping hook. For divine providence will not remain silent, but will be the death of you through grievous afflictions in other lands, because you are not raising seed for your brother, but satisfying your carnal lust and committing adultery, since there are already 4 children of his own." Hearing this, Herod was enraged and ordered him to be beaten and thrown out. This man, however, didn't cease, but wherever he encountered Herod, he spoke this way, accusing him until Antipas put him away in a dungeon. His character was strange and his way of life not that of a normal human being, for he existed just like a bodiless spirit. His mouth knew not bread, nor did he even taste the unleavened bread at Passover, saying that it was in remembrance of Elohim, who had delivered the people from servitude, and that the journey was urgent. Wine and fermented liquor he would not allow near him. He detested all animal flesh. He denounced all injustice, and for his needs there were tree branches. Next section. This is page 5. I think this will be the last one I'll do. I want there to be some intrigue left. I want you to ask for this. I want you to ask for this set of quotations, and then I want you to buy the book when you get done. You know, we are supporting a lot of people in Haiti, starving children, and I know you've heard it before, uneducated children in our schools. We even set up a Torah-centric Yahad there. We've got a great director who is a Haitian man. I've known him for many years, and we have been working with them down there now for the past, I suppose since 2000. And we got a great work. And that's where our money goes, not to buy our baby clothes, but to buy education. The people down there, even the professional teachers, ask for very little, ask for very little for pay. It's the only place they can possibly get money. And you know, that country, Haiti, is governed by violent gangs. There is no government there at all. There have been many times that these gang members have interfered with our ministry there, but Yah has always pulled us through. And I believe it's because we have demanded that Torah be taught above all things to those 400 children and in that congregation. So here's the man who was no man. At that time, there appeared a man if it's proper to call him a man, whose nature and form were human, but whose appearance was more than human, and whose acts were divine. He worked wonderful and powerful prodigies. Therefore, it's impossible for me to call him a man. Then again, in view of his common nature, let them not call him an angel. Everything he did by some unseen power, by word and command. Some said of him, our first lawgiver has risen from the dead and has been demonstrating many cures and skills. Others thought that he was sent from Elohim, but he was much opposed to the Torah and did not observe the Sabbath according to ancestral custom. That's because he was on a different calendar than the temple people. They were on the lunisolar moon calendar. Yeshua and the gospel writers, at least three of them, were on the Zadokite calendar. And so you can understand why Josephus would say he was much opposed to the Torah and opposed to the oral Torah as well, and didn't observe in accordance to ancestral custom. When he was rubbing the ears of corn out in the field and he was caught there doing that, it wasn't his Sabbath. It might have been theirs. Many of the people followed him and listened to his teachings, as we do. Many people were aroused, thinking that by him the Jewish tribes would free themselves from the hands of the Romans. It was his habit rather to remain before the city on the Mount of Olives. 150 servants and a multitude of people joined him there. He also gave cures to people free of charge. Oh, this is where it starts getting really good, telling us a lot. The wonder worker controversy, the trial, servants of the wonder workers. These are Yeshua's people. The Egyptian mentioned in Acts chapter 6, who was that Acts 6? No, it was later on in Acts where we thought you were the Egyptian, speaking of Paul. There was a messianic contender at that time called the Egyptian. Civil war in Jerusalem, etc. Well, I'm done and I'm tired, but I can send you the whole book, PDF. I'm glad to do it. Or I can send you these quotes if you're not interested in reading that, this short version here, which I've read 5 pages from. So I thank you for listening. I've got a lot of free books for you. They're free. I hope somebody starts buying some of them, but one of them is a good seller, and that's the Nazarene Acts, Volume 1, also called the Clementine Recognitions. Forget that pseudo-Clement stuff. And this last year, I've added 2 big volumes to it. Nazarene Acts Volume 2, the homilies. Nazarene Acts Volume 3, Secret Clement. There's a lot of Clement books that are secret from other places. And Kipha and Clement in Europe, whereas these, the Acts and the homilies, the recognitions and homilies, are in the Holy Land. Volume 3 is all about Peter and Clement and the other apostles in Europe. Yes, I do believe that Kipha was in Rome for some time. I'm sure of it. There are too many stories, too many histories of him being there. And I can even tell you more about that if you want. But anyway, here it is. Get on at yahad.me and request, and I shall send you what you want. You'll find most of these here at NazareneActs.com. Amen. Thank you. May Yahweh bless you even more. May Elohim open up the secrets and mysteries of the ages to you and me so that we might know that we know. Amen.